In the damp, suffocating jungles of the Pacific during World War II, Japanese soldiers moved silently through the shadows, their slim pistols glinting faintly in the moonlight. Each weapon was carried with pride, a symbol of honor, precision, and discipline. These sidearms, the Nambu pistols, were elegant and finely crafted. Officers treated them as a badge of courage, a reflection of their loyalty to the empire. But that confidence was soon to be tested against something far more brutal. When battles closed in, when soldiers could smell the gunpowder and hear each other breathe, the difference between life and death came down to a single trigger pull. That's when another weapon entered the story, one that would echo through the war like a thunderclap, the Colt 45. Its sound was unmistakable, a deep, thunderous roar that cut through chaos and shattered the courage of those who heard it. It wasn't just another pistol, it was fear itself in metallic form. On the islands of the Pacific, soldiers began to whisper about it. They said one bullet from that American sidearm could stop a man dead in his tracks. It was power condensed into steel, simple, heavy, and unforgiving. A gun built for one purpose only, to end the fight instantly. This is the story of how the Colt 45 became more than a weapon, how it became a legend of terror that haunted the battlefield. When American Marines first landed on Guadalcanal, most of them believed rifles and machine guns would win the war. Pistols were secondary, backup tools for desperate moments. Nobody imagined the Colt 45 would become a soldier's most trusted friend. The Japanese Army arrived with supreme confidence. Their training emphasized courage and honor, not firepower. Their pistols, the Type 14 Nambu, were lighter, more graceful. A weapon made for officers, not survival. They saw the Colt as outdated and crude, a bulky relic of the past. But in the jungles of Guadalcanal, mud and humidity were the true enemies, and elegant weapons quickly showed their weakness. Rifles jammed, magazines rusted, springs broke. And when the fighting drew close, within meters, sometimes inches, grace meant nothing. Only one thing mattered: who could pull the trigger and make it count? That's where the Colt began to earn its fearsome name. Its heavy frame and large caliber gave it raw stopping power unmatched by any sidearm of the time. While other pistols fired small, fast rounds, the Colt fired slow, heavy bullets that crushed through flesh and bone. It didn't pierce, it destroyed. In the chaos of the jungle, that meant one bullet could end a charge that might otherwise overrun an entire position. Word spread quickly through the ranks. The Colt didn't need a second shot. Soldiers began carrying it not as backup, but as their last line of defense, the weapon they trusted when everything else failed. For the Japanese, that realization came in the most painful way possible, face to face in the dark. The first time Japanese troops encountered the Colt's fire, confusion turned to shock. They had expected resistance, but not the kind that could stop a charging man mid-stride. One shot, that was all it took. And the soldier who moments ago was fearless fell instantly to the ground. The sound of that blast carried through the trees like rolling thunder. Those who survived spoke of it in disbelief. The pistol that could knock a man down with a single hit. In war, fear spreads faster than gunfire, and soon even the bravest began to hesitate before rushing American lines. The Colt was no longer just a weapon, it had become a psychological weapon, a sound that made men think twice before attacking. For American soldiers, that fear worked like armor. The design of the Colt 45 had been born from blood lessons decades earlier. During America's campaign in the Philippines, smaller bullets had failed to stop charging enemies. Soldiers demanded something stronger, something that could end a fight instantly. Engineer John Browning answered that call, creating a weapon built not for elegance but for impact. His pistol fired a .45 caliber round, slow, deliberate, and devastating. It didn't need speed, it relied on sheer force. When that bullet hit, It didn't leave questions. It left silence. And that silence became the Colt's signature. The Japanese Nambu pistol, by comparison, was delicate. Its smaller bullets were accurate, but lacked the stopping power needed in close-quarters combat. The weapon's light frame made it easy to carry, but also fragile under the rough conditions of war. Soldiers often complained of jamming, misfires, and broken parts in the field. In the thick humidity of the Pacific, that was the difference between life and death. The Colt, though heavier, worked under any condition: rain, sand, or mud. Marines trusted it because it always fired when needed most. That trust soon turned into reverence. On the battlefield, respect is earned by results, not by looks. The Colt earned its place one brutal night at a time. Marines would empty their rifles, grab the Colt, and fire point blank at charging enemies. The recoil was harsh, the blast deafening, but it ended the fight instantly. Enemies collapsed mid-motion, their bodies thrown backward by the sheer force of impact. Witnesses said it looked as though they'd been hit by a hammer rather than a bullet. That image stuck with everyone who saw it. The legend of the Colt began to spread faster than any bullet it fired. Japanese soldiers, proud and fearless, were taught to never retreat. But courage began to falter when they realized their sidearms couldn't match the Americans. They learned the hard way that charging into a Colt's range meant near certain death. Soon they began scavenging captured Colts from fallen enemies, desperate to use its power for themselves. Some called it the American Devil's Weapon, believing it carried an unholy strength. That name only fueled the Colt's myth, the pistol that even the enemy feared enough to steal. It wasn't just a tool of war anymore. It was a symbol of dominance, a weapon that turned courage into hesitation. In foxholes and trenches, Marines told stories about the gun's unmatched reliability. If the rifle jams, they said, the Colt won't. Each story grew a little larger, but the truth behind them stayed the same. The pistol always worked. For soldiers in the field, that reliability meant everything. It gave them confidence when everything else was chaos. To hold a Colt was to hold certainty in a world where nothing was guaranteed. The Japanese, on the other hand, began to feel that same certainty slipping away. Each time they heard that thunderous blast, it reminded them that bravery had its limits. As months passed, the Colt became more than a weapon. It became an identity. It represented American toughness, simplicity, and trust in engineering over elegance. Even its sound became symbolic, deep, final, and unmistakable. For the Japanese, that sound became a warning that the next step forward could be their last. Fear doesn't always come from what you see. Sometimes it's what you hear. And for those soldiers, the Colt's roar was the voice of death itself. They called it the Pistol of Thunder. Every man who heard it remembered it for the rest of his life. The Colt's effect went beyond the battlefield. It changed the way soldiers thought about close combat. The pistol had proven that reliability and stopping power mattered more than elegance or speed. It reminded everyone that in real war, survival isn't about style, it's about what works. When the war ended, veterans carried home stories of the Colt's power. Some kept it as a souvenir, others as a memory of how close they'd come to death. To many, it was more than a weapon. It was a guardian that never failed them. Even today, that reputation remains untouched. Collectors, historians, and soldiers still speak of the Colt 45 with reverence. It wasn't the most advanced gun ever made, but it was one of the most trusted. Its simplicity was its strength, and its power was unmatched for decades. When veterans described it, they didn't talk about specs. They talked about trust. In their words, it wasn't just a firearm. It was a friend that always answered when called. Few weapons in history have carried that kind of legacy. The Colt 45 did, because it earned it in the blood and mud of war. And in every soldier's memory, its echo still remains. Fear, power, and respect. That's what defined the Colt's name. It taught the world that even a single weapon in the right hands could change the course of a battle. In those dark jungles, one pistol became more feared than any rifle, and its legend still whispers through history. The gun that made even the bravest soldiers stop in their tracks. The Colt 45.